Hi, and welcome to Career Mobility with James Mcilvena. It is September today, and we are moving into spring. Pretty good, James. Hey.
Very happy for it, DJ. Spring has sprung, and I think we could all do with a dose of sunshine, good weather, and flowers bursting in the gardens.
Absolutely, absolutely. Hopefully that's what we get from today onwards. Now, we are going to be talking today about some exciting things that have actually kicked off today out there in the market, which is the Jobs and Skills Summit for 2022. What do you know about it, James, and what sorts of things are being discussed?
Yeah, look, we're following it pretty closely given its relevance to the businesses LHH is in, but specifically because it is covering some big ticket items. So one, it's talking about people's ability to keep pace with inflation and wage rates out there. And, you know, it's not stagnant, but effectively people's overall feeling like they're going backwards, even when they're getting 3.5% wage increases, you know, they're still not keeping up with inflation. And so that's topic number one. And topic that's come off the back of that is they've said that there's up to 10% of the workforce swapped roles. I don't think it's at the level of those themes around great resignation that people predicted would come out of the US, but 10% is still a significant amount of the workforce, to which they've said, you know, 2/3 of that is people staying pretty much within industry, but a third of it is people leaving their industries. And one of the drivers for that is around paying conditions. And one of the biggest outflows is in healthcare and childcare and aged care as well. And then the final bit, and the bit which I think I've been focusing a lot of our energy to see what comes out of it, is because for all of the people, all of the clients in our programs who often watch what you and I talk about, it's that skilling component. You know, it's the upskilling, it's the reskilling they're talking about. So most of the large TAFEs, a couple of the larger unis are represented there. And so this theme around how do you actually get micro-credentialing in place to help people address the skills gap, and beyond the free TAFE courses, which the federal government has committed to, how do you actually provide more opportunities for people, and what is the cost and who bears the cost of that retraining to bridge the skills gap in Australia? So that concept that where we left off last time around how do you actually demonstrate the investment in your potential and your learning, I'm watching really closely to see what is done, both private sector and also government sector, when it comes to creating greater opportunities for our people to access formal credentialing, micro-credentialing, or anything that's going to help with the upskilling and reskilling journey over and above the support we give them through the coaching and the technology portals.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're definitely seeing things like, obviously, I mean, LinkedIn Learning, and obviously just sort of, you know, tracking your learning with those sorts of things, very important. But also, you know, from a technology perspective, lots of micro-credentialing showing up on LinkedIn and things like that as well. So people being able to prove their experience, and, you know, it's more like the building blocks really towards, you know, qualifying for a role versus just a job title or previous experience.
Yeah, and a lot of both customers and employers I'm talking with are sort of grappling with at the moment, you know, what's the right mix around investing in our people? How do you free up time for them to be able to invest in their own learning versus actually doing the job that they need to do? And how do you find the right mix between a merry-go-round of people wanting to leave roles even internally and move between roles too quickly, versus actually limiting people's potential internally? And so it's a real, you know, similar to the hybrid working we've talked about previously, where they want to provide all the support and love because they really want to retain their people at the moment. But at the same time, it's not as easy as full flexibility work from home or full back in the office. There's a whole spectrum in between. And it's exactly the same with skilling and support for internal mobility. It absolutely should be encouraged to ensure people are not left in legacy roles that are likely to be replaced or automated. But at the same time, there's also, from the business's side, there's also this requirement to, if you support someone, you train someone in a new role, then there's almost the return on investment time of, you expect the person to be in the role and to actually perform that role. You can't constantly have people developing and jumping from role to role before they ever actually contribute, deliver the work based on the training. Also, for the individual, we all know, anyone who's ever been through a training course knows, if you sit through a training course and then bang, course finishes, and you dust it off and you get your participant guide and you don't put that into practice, try and do that skill. Try and practice that skill 4 months later. If you haven't practiced it from the final day when your course finished, you got the participant guide, you got no hope. So really, then you're not actually getting people who are getting the ability to invest in themselves and add to their kit bag of transferable and usable skills. You're just getting a whole bunch of people doing learning for the sake of learning. Yeah,
that sense of integrating learning once you've got it. I totally agreed. It's it's wonderful to learn, but you have to use it. Otherwise, that old adage, if you don't use it, you lose it. Becomes the what. So yeah, it's an interesting one. I think. I mean, obviously, when you're in transition, you need to be learning. There may not be the immediate opportunity to necessarily utilize those skills, but for sure, looking to put them into practice in some way within the realms of what you're doing is really important.
Yeah, look, and absolutely. And if you think about it from an individual in transition, TJ, it's the same as an individual who's come to outgrow their role internally and is looking to acquire skills in order to be able to move into a new role. It's just a different dynamic in the fact that this person is in transition between two organizations rather than internally within the same organization. But to your point, the goal is the same in that you're learning that skill in order to apply it. And so that would be a great, I suppose, start point for any client of ours who's listening to this and saying, when I'm investing in learning, can I clearly articulate why that learning is useful to where I want to go next? How am I going to apply the learning? Otherwise, it gets back to that point of, am I just doing something for the sake of saying I'm doing something? Now, there's some value in that. You want to do some things from time to time that are linked to your interests maybe, and not necessarily linked to a professional outcome. And it still shows a growth mindset. But realistically, if you want that tangible link for an employer to say, wow, TJ, you've thought about this, you've probably done some networking, you've understood what my organization's needed and which skills we want and we value in future, then you've proactively gone out and figured out a way to invest in some self-learning or some credentialing. And hence the flow through is, and if I'm employed in this role with your organization, I'll be able to apply that learning. Hence you get the link between the investment in the learning and the application of learning. When you're in transition though, it's a little bit, less direct, because you've got to rely on the new organization and understanding what they value. And you don't necessarily know which organization you'll be working for. So it's a little bit more opaque than internally, where often you've got a really good idea of what skills and where the future focus is. But I think the take out of all of that is, before the investment of time, up front, how am I going to apply the learning? And if you're going to do learning for the sake of learning, just acknowledge that's what it is, but make sure you've then got a balance of employment-based learning as well as interest-based.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, sometimes people are learning to round out skills they already have. So it's just building upon, particular sort of knowledge base. I mean, I think the interesting one is with technology skills, when it literally is a new skill. I think then, 100% know why you're doing that and where you're going to apply it, because, it's quite a significant, input of time often, and financials can be. So, just be clear on those things before you're stepping into those opportunities.
And asking the employer too, right? If you've started on that journey, so you might not have had a time to do, a complete immersive course. So we'll use tech, for example, right? If you want to learn about Python and you've done some introductory courses there, but you're not yet ready to jump on the tools and code, then effectively you can show that you've started that journey, but then it can be a query that you ask of a potential employer and give you a really good idea by being specific.
Yeah.
Because the big difference between an open question, hey, what does LHH do to invest in their people? What kind of learning programs do you have? And you'll normally get the response back from a potential employer saying, oh, well, we've got X number of courses and there's a learning management system and you can access that. That's very, very different to actually being able to say specifically, this is where I'm headed. I've started the journey. I've started and done an introductory course in Python. How will this organization support me to build that into a new career direction?
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I mean, there's so many incredible skills required out there now. So yeah, just be very clear about the pathway moving forward. I know one of the other things we spoke about, with regard to the summit, my understanding is that there's sort of a change also in terms of the obviously we know we're in a skills shortage, and that's kind of happening globally, but certainly it's sort of a change on immigration sort of requirements here as well. I do know some people at the moment who are in process, and it's some of those things are taking a fair bit of time. So what was your take on that side of things as well?
Yeah, so I mean, it was clearly stated that one of the outcomes is going to be to look at the level of skilled migration.
Yeah.
And the other component to it is looking at the permanency of the migration of the individuals who come in. So, without getting into the detailed politics of it, Australia has always had a history of bringing people in short term, very transient nature. When COVID hit, like a lot of the people left incredibly unsupported, needed to leave the country on short notice. It's always been super hard, and so many hurdles to jump over for individuals to go through, from coming in on skilled migration visas to move to permanent residency. Like, we have, for a range of different reasons, always made it incredibly difficult. So I think one of the outcomes is to look at how do they actually create better net skilled migration, but to do it with less barriers and to make it more permanent. So the people coming in are people who are coming in to settle and build a life in Australia, rather than do 1 or 2 or 4-year stints in Australia, and then with the ultimate intent over time of moving back home. Now, what does that mean for anyone who is in the process at the moment? It probably is going to take a while to flow through, but it will mean increased competition over time. And it will be interesting to watch. I don't know the outcomes. I could guess at a few, but I don't know the outcomes. But there are definitely going to be some groups that are going to be targeted. So, for example, they'll look at things like, data and analytics. They'll look at things like development. They'll look at things like healthcare in order to bring people in. But I've also had to talk about, for each of these segments, just because Australia wants and needs the skills, they've also got to look at the broader social imperative of not draining skills out of countries that need it. So I think healthcare, for example, is it socially responsible for Australia to encourage, net permanent migration of a whole bunch of healthcare professionals and then leave other countries, particularly within our own region, underrepresented and leaving them with the greater skills crisis? So it's always a super complex question, but for anyone who is in transition is looking at this, know the segments that they're looking at net skills migration for 2 reasons. One, it probably means there's plenty of opportunity there. So if it's listed, there's going to be plenty of opportunity within that segment. And 2, if you're in that segment, know that over time there is likely to be greater competition. So watch closely on the numbers and the arrangements of which the government are offering.
Yeah, brilliant points. I think it's been such a unique time that we've been through. I don't feel like we're through it yet either. I feel like there's still, lots of kind of remnants of that. I mentioned to you before we jumped on, though, that we are back into doing lots of face-to-face things now, which is kind of refreshing. Also bringing together groups of employers at career fairs and things like that. So things are definitely starting to move towards, pre-COVID times. But it just feels like it could snap back at any time. So kind of make the most of it where you can. But lots
and it's interesting. I mean, that's a lot of the hesitancy at the moment, TJ. So it's one thing to actually declare a policy around wanting to have greater net skilled migration, but a lot of people are still really fearful about the fact that if they shift and they move for a role to another country, will there be COVID Mark II, and they'll be potentially locked down or unable to get back in and get access to their home country to see family and friends. So it's definitely a more cautious environment out there. But on the flip side, we've now got the reduction to, or the intended reduction to only 5 days of isolation before people are out there working again. And so it does really feel like they're trying to turn the corner and get back to this, let's just live normally again. And then the other thing which we picked up in previous discussions is, and I was in North Sydney yesterday and then the city the day before, just watching the crowds increase, even though there is still this whole how many days are people working from the office versus working from home question, which is unresolved. And again, a continuum for employers around what they do versus personal preference and people choosing.
Yeah, I mean, the wonderful thing is there is still lots of opportunity in the market. There's still a lot of roles around. Companies are busy. There's, even though there's still that uncertainty, and frankly, obviously opening up of a lot of hybrid working opportunities and things like that just weren't there before. So there's no better time than to embrace your program, really kind of take on board all of the resources that you've got access to, and really just connect in with our team and make sure that you're doing everything you can to move towards the outcome that you're looking for. Really, it's a great time to be in transition, frankly.
Absolutely. And as you were telling me before around the job fair that you're coordinating, the employers really want to actually come to us and seek out talent at the moment.
Yeah, they do.
But they want talent that has been vetted, and so the investment that they make in the time they spend with us and their coaches and following the advice they get, and and the unlocking of their potential and the acquisition of new skills, that's all time really well spent, because employers just aren't looking for anyone. And because we're part of the broader Adecco group, I get a lot of feedback as part of that LT around the increasing dissatisfaction around job search through job boards, so your traditional job boards, and the fact that in current market, number of applications has spiked, it's really high, but it is really difficult for recruitment teams, either internal or recruiters, who have larger numbers than ever of vacancies on, and also larger numbers of applications at the same time, to pick through and to deliver the candidate care they'd like and to find the right people. And so the more people are doing their core things, which is getting involved and getting into the digital talent exchange, where, as you articulated, employers are coming and saying, oh, these people are already pre-vetted and I know I can find quality people, like, great. And that's what they're looking for, is not to search through 120 job board applications when they can look at people who have been pre-vetted. And then secondly, it's the networking component, which I know almost every single person who's in a LHH program will have heard their coach talk about the importance of networking. And that helps cut through, again, all of that noise to get the direct connection to the opportunities.
Yeah, look, I mean, it's so true. I mean, even for myself, in making the connections with employers, I always talk about, UK used to be 6 degrees of separation. Australia tends to be 3. And I recently needed to find a contact, and literally it was that, find someone who knows someone else who knows someone else, and hey presto, you've got your result. And that can be the same when you're in job search as well. So always be willing to have conversations and build relationships. That's really, all you need to be doing. And the more of those you do, the more outcomes you'll get.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more.
Sharpening the sword. Awesome. All right. Well, you have a fantastic month, James. I look forward to seeing you October. And we'll see what fun stuff's happening in Q4 of the year.
Absolutely. And I look forward to, given spring has sprung, we'll both have a slightly better tan when next we meet.
Let's hope so.
Thanks, DJ.
Cheers, James.